Georgia and Alabama. It just doesn't get any bigger than that in the SEC or in college football. Kirby Smart met with the media today ahead of him taking his Dogs into Tuscaloosa to take on the Crimson Tide this Saturday.
Yeah, Coach, pretty obvious they've experienced a bunch of coaching turnover. How much have you seen them change from a football standpoint?
I mean, they're different defensively, for sure. You know, obviously the offensive staff and defensive staff changed. But there's remnants, I mean, because the quarterback's the same, so you keep some things the same with them. And, you know, most of college football is doing something similar. So there's some similarities into that. But obviously the history there that's at Washington, Kalen's history, and then defensively, history Kane has, and what they've done this year as well. It's different.
Well, I mean, obviously it's going to be different. You've got a new coaching staff there, and of course there's going to be some carryover because you have a lot of the same guys that Georgia faced the last time they squared off against Alabama in the SEC championship game. As far as particulars, I mean, you just don't know how it's going to be different because you don't know the kind of game plan that Kalen DeBoer and his coaching staff are going to choose to implement against the Dogs this Saturday.
Yeah, how much, if any, insight at all does TRAVARIS have on this Alabama team, and what has he brought to this team now as he's your co-defensive coordinator and safeties coach?
Well, he's a really good coach. He's a really good recruiter. He's a great person. So he's brought a lot of energy, enthusiasm, confidence day to day in our players. He's a good football coach. So we're very fortunate to have him, and he's got a lot of knowledge. As far as pertaining to them, I mean, he really hasn't been part of their staff. So it's like intricacies into what they do defensively or offensively, not a lot there. I mean, he knows some of their players, but we know a lot of their players too because we recruited a lot of them. And, I mean, Dante was with some of them out in California. So, you know, it's not a lot to speak of, a lot of things that you can hang your hat on. You're worried about how we play, not the particulars about their players.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand these are obligatory questions because of the carryover, the pairing between Alabama and the crossover between coaching staffs. And the bottom line is that happens among seemingly all of Georgia's opponents once you get into SEC play because coaches move around. That's just the name of the business, right? That's just how it goes. So, I don't know. It's kind of like the Nick Saban thing with Kirby. To me, it feels tired, but I get that maybe you have to ask the question and give him a chance to answer it. There's just not much there right now.
Are you expecting it to be strange for you going back there without having Nick Saban as the other coach?
No, I don't expect it to be strange. I mean, it's just the normal course of progression. I think it's strange going back there sometimes because I lived there our kids were born there and lived there for 9 years and had such great experiences there. But we had that in COVID. It was more strange then because of the stands.
Again, just like I just said.
Might be small, just 3 games. What type of jump in Jalen's game have you seen since the last time you played him? Yeah,
it's considerable jump as a just natural pocket passer. You see him make more throws now that are like rhythm throws, on-time throws, RPO throws. You know, you can tell he's become more comfortable with those things. Still, some of his best and most exciting plays are when things break down or when he runs the ball by design. Either one is very dangerous. But you can see him as a deep ball passer, the vertical passing game, the shots, the rhythm throws, the outs, the timing throws, the RPO throws. He's improved immensely at that part of his game, but he's always been good at the athletic part of the game.
That's interesting because Kirby obviously has given the young man credit where it's due, right? He's got a quarterback. He's got a new head coach who primarily focuses on quarterbacks and quarterback play and offensive schemes. So it is not at all like unusual or unexpected, I guess, that you would see MILROE progress in becoming better at those types of things that this type of head coach is going to ask him to do. But Kirby pointed right to the fact that he's always been a very dangerous player. He was the most dangerous player on the field last year in the SEC championship game, and he made just enough plays to help tilt the game in Alabama's favor. So that's really going to be true this week against Alabama. MILROE is probably the best player on the field Saturday night. He may not be the technically best quarterback, but he's certainly probably the most explosive player on the field. Now, who knows? Somebody else might step up and make a play. Maybe I'll be wrong in that, but going into the game, you have to say that containing Jalen MILROE is going to be priority number one for the Georgia Bulldogs defense. And of course, Kirby's saying that he has shown improvement in his game. If he hadn't shown improvement, you should really take Kalen DeBoer to task if you're an Alabama fan. With that said, everything I hear from the Alabama people is that he still is not a pocket passer, in that he doesn't work through his progressions in the way that you should. He is not very accurate or consistent in his intermediate range throws. So he tends to rely on his athletic ability at the first sign of things breaking down when he's attempting to do those things. So yeah, he's improved. Does that make him Peyton Manning or even Carson Beck in terms of being able to throw the complete route tree? It does not.
You actually touched on this a minute ago, but I was just going to ask you, is there any nostalgia at all when you go back to Tuscaloosa now, having spent so much time there, so much time in that stadium?
Less now. I mean, it's just, you move on. I think last time we went, it was 4 or 5 years from the time we had lived there, and it's so weird when you play there because you're in and out. You're there and then you're gone. So it's just different, but you really focus on the players, what they have to do, what we have to do to execute, that it takes away from that thing. There's a lot of people that are still there in the organization that I'm close with and have a lot of respect for, but that's the case in a lot of these places in the SEC.
Right. There's just going to be so many of these questions, but you can tell Kirby he's trying to think of 14 different ways to answer the same question. He really told you what it's about. If he were not focused solely on this game, this is not a vacation. This is not homecoming. He's not going back to have dinner with all these people that he's talking about. He appreciates them still being in Tuscaloosa. That's not what this is. And if he spends 1 second of time worrying about that in the run up to this game, then Georgia deserves to get beaten on Saturday. That's not what this is about. That's what makes these questions kind of ludicrous. These are questions for the offseason. These are questions that were asked after Nick Saban retired. These are the questions that were asked in spring practice, in summer camp, right? I get it, but man, it's tired. Let's move on to something else. Kirby needs to be focused on this game, and he is. During game time, do you think he's going to be caring about any of that other extraneous stuff? No. If he is, then he deserves to get beaten. And he doesn't deserve to be paid the way he's paid to be the head coach at the University of Georgia.
Yeah, Kirby, I guess to follow up on MILROE, one, do you look at all at last year's game just with the jump you feel that he's made? And two, what are the challenges of defending him, especially for a front seven, keeping rush lanes, keeping contained, things like that?
Yeah, do you look at last year's game? Well, you always look at things like that from a personnel standpoint, matchup. You see guys in that game, our game, that overlap. But with him, the challenges are immense because he's an incredible football player. I mean, there is no design to a play that you can draw up and then say, well, I'm pretty sure this is going to happen on this play with him, because you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, sometimes the worst thing you can do is cover everybody with him. And sometimes the best thing you can do is cover everybody. It just depends. Are you capable of getting him down on the ground and tackling him at times? What matchups do you have? He is as different a football player in college football as I've played against in a long time, because people think he's just a runner, and that's not the case. He has a tremendous arm and can do things with his arm that other people can't. He can reach spots on the field and get it there faster than you can break on it, better than most arm talent people. So it's a tremendous challenge to defend a guy like him.
Well, Kirby laid it out for you right there. The thing about playing a player like Jalen MILROE is that because of his skill set, he makes Alabama right when they're wrong. And he makes his opponents, Georgia in this instance, wrong even when they're right. So Georgia can do everything that they're supposed to do. Try to keep him in the cage with a controlled pass rush, squeeze the pocket on him, make him throw the ball down the field. And then that's still not the right thing to do because they're not on an all-out pass rush. Now your DBs are stressed because they're having to cover longer. So then maybe somebody slips behind someone else and MILROE goes up top and hurts you that way. Or maybe you do choose to get after him, you bust, and now you open up a crease and you've got everybody in man-to-man behind you because you chose to try to go get him. And MILROE makes his team right and makes you wrong because he pulls the ball down and scrambles for that first down that you were trying so hard to keep him from getting. So that is the challenge of facing a player like Jalen MILROE. The task is incredibly difficult. So is he going to make plays on Saturday night? For sure. The thing is, can Georgia limit the number of explosive plays he creates? Can they make a play when they need to get him off the field to prevent him from being able to pick up that third down that extends a drive for the Crimson Tide? And in a perfect world, can they do what they need to do to upset him enough to force him to make a mistake? Either putting the ball on the ground as a fumble, tricking him on the back end, hurrying up his internal clock so he makes a bad throw. Maybe we get a turnover that way. Very, very challenging to play Jalen MILROE. Like I said, the most explosive, the most dangerous player on the field Saturday night, the number one thing that Georgia has to get a handle on if they're going to beat Alabama.
Kirby over here, the value of the two-part question, the value of the bye week for Carson and Coach Bobo to look at the first three games, and then two, just where your linebacking core is at in this game compared with the last time you met Alabama.
Value for Coach Bobo and Carson, I think it's relative because they had an off week too, so it's not like you're going to make these incredible jumps because of a bye week. What do you do in the bye week? You look back at yourself, you look back and you do quality control, you try to find tendency breakers, you try to find new wrinkles, you try to really get better at blocking and tackling, which is what football is, and that's what we focused on, was that how do we get better as an entire team, even the younger part of your team. So that was the focus of the bye week. In terms of our linebacking core, I think Smile is closer to healthy. I think this time last year he was having to play with a really hurt foot, and he was pushing through, and he pushed through in the SEC championship game with a significant injury. And I don't know if he's 100%, but he's much closer. I mean, he's come off a significant surgery and playing much better. The two younger guys are a little bit older and a little more experienced. But still, those guys, when I look at Raylan and CJ, they're relatively young players, and they're in their second year. They got to play a lot more last year than typically they would. And then Jalen's playing as well, multiple positions. But those four guys are all playing good.
I get that it's a bit of a boring answer for him to say, man, we just have to, self-scout. We have to clean up our own business. We have to get better at blocking and tackling. But coming on the heels of the performance they put on the field in Lexington, where they missed 16, 18 tackles defensively, where they busted communication both on offense and defense, which led to less than successful plays for the Dogs in that struggle that they saw, whether they just spent some time working on footwork on the offensive line or ball handling if you are Carson Beck and your ball fakes. Georgia had a lot to work on in that regard. So that's not just coach speak. That is the basics of football that Georgia has to get better at if they're going to be successful both Saturday night and throughout the course of this season. Now, on the linebackers in particular, no doubt those dudes were young last year. They really hurt Georgia in some ways because of their youth, both because of what Georgia could do schematically, but also just in flat out busts, which led to direct scores for Alabama. So, having some more time under their belt is a good thing for those young linebackers. But having Smile healthy, more healthy, as Kirby put it, having Jalen Walker playing the way he's playing, and then having those two young guys who now have this added experience, they are playing well. And they are going to have to play well against Alabama for Georgia to win. And I've got more to say about that this week in the way I think Georgia needs to attack Alabama. But why do you go recruit players like C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson? Why do you get that body type like Smile Munden, like Jalen Walker? It's for games like this, to take on athletic quarterbacks, right? You get after them, you rush the passer, blitz, not blitz, whatever, or you find yourself in open field and you have to make a tackle. It's the kind of speed and athleticism that this type linebacker that Georgia has. Those are the skill sets that got you to Georgia. Now you have to use those to take on a player like Jalen MILROE in a game like Georgia, Alabama, with more than 10 million people watching on Saturday night. That's why you're here. That's why you were brought here. It is imperative that those players play well against MILROE and Alabama this Saturday night if the Dogs are going to get the win.
Kirby, how is MYKEL Williams, and are you optimistic he'll be able to play?
I'm hopeful. We'll see. He didn't do much last week. He got a lot of rehab Friday and Sunday, and was able to run and do some things Friday and Sunday, which is positive, but hadn't been out to practice today, and we'll see how today goes.
Yeah, just as well, how are Warren Brinson and Jordan Hall doing, and how much in the offseason did you go back and rewatch that Alabama game and try and diagnose what went wrong for y'all that day?
I don't watch the games in the offseason. We watch the games after it. We go through and critique those and then try to get better at the tendencies and the things we have to. We look at future opponents, and Alabama was a future opponent, but it wasn't the same staff as it was prior to that. Warren Brinson practiced last week, the end of the week, and then we're hopeful to get Jordan Hall back, who's been working really hard, tirelessly, doing rehab, and been busting his butt all weekend. So we'll see where he's at today.
So there you go. That was cool to get an update on the players that have been injured because we have a lot of questions about those. He mentioned MYKEL Williams, who is improving. We have to see how he does at practice, of course. Same with Jordan Hall, of course. If I had to bet, I would bet that all three of those players are going to be available, both MYKEL Williams, then you're going to have Brinson, who's back out there, as well as Jordan Hall. I would bet that all three of those guys are going to be dressed out and ready to go on Saturday. Now, I'm not basing this on anything other than publicly available information. That's just my feel about it. I think the least of those three might be Jordan Hall in terms of his availability. I totally expect to see MYKEL Williams and Warren Brinson play, even if they can't, go their normal workload. I think having them dressed and having them strategically used for depth or something like that is going to be open and an option for the Dogs on Saturday. But here's hoping they can be cleared and ready to go, especially Williams and Brinson, because that would do a lot. If Jordan's ready to go, that makes the Georgia rotation even that much stronger. So fingers crossed. Let's hope those dudes are ready to go Saturday.
Kirby, each week you talk about one of the keys to the game is explosive plays. This Alabama team puts up a lot of explosive plays. How do you prep for that?
Well, you do your job. I mean, they've got explosive plays that are, what would you call off-schedule explosive plays, and they've got on-schedule explosive plays. So when you have a chance at both those, it just increases your opportunity. And their explosives are super explosive. They don't, they're not talking about the 15-20 variety. They're talking about the 50, 60, 70 variety. They've got some really good skilled players out on the perimeter that are explosive. They got a quarterback that defines explosive, and they got good backs. So, when you got good football players and weapons that they have out on the perimeter, it can be explosive. Our job is to try to prevent those, not give up big plays, and a lot of that starts with, how well we play around the quarterback.
I think Kirby hit the nail on the head right there at the end. Everything else was just him rehashing and making the point that I was bringing out earlier, which is that MILROE makes them dangerous off schedule. And then when you do have talented players like Ryan Williams and others, I'm not going to list off their depth chart there, but they have guys that can make huge plays for them. And so you have to be buttoned up both in the back end as well as on the front end. And that's what Kirby was talking about there. Really, it starts with how you play around the quarterback, meaning the defensive line, of course, defensive ends, outside linebackers, and those middle linebackers if they choose to bring them in various pressures or fake pressures and looks, because you're trying to disrupt his rhythm and his picture. You want to muddy it so that hopefully you can force him, both through the amount of pass rush you're getting as well as the confusion you create, into making some mistakes that will help you get them off the field, or even better, help you take the ball away.
You've seen your share of elite wide receivers at Alabama. Is Ryan Williams one of those potentially elite wide receivers, and what kind of problems does he possess for your secondary and your corners?
Yeah, he's in the same line with the guys they've had in the past. Super quick, talented, confident with the ball, great ball skills, great quickness. He's a track athlete that was elite as a junior. You know, then he comes out and he's already performing at a high level. I don't think that there's a lot of anxiety or nerves for him. He's not one of these guys that the moment's too big for him. He naturally jumped right in and has made plays in every game. And they have a lot of really good skill players out on the perimeter. And I think that JALEN does a good job of using his skill set to get them the ball.
Yeah, I mean, he's just driving home that point. They've got playmakers. MILROE can get the ball to them in space and let them make plays. The job is hard for Georgia's defense this week. There is no two ways around it. But if they are who they say they are, then Georgia is going to have to step up and dictate this game, as opposed to playing reaction to this game, right? Reacting to whatever Alabama's doing. Think back a couple of years when Tennessee was coming to Athens and they were the number one team in the country. And you remember that audio that was captured from Kirby at practice where he's talking about giving up layups because of busts and failures to communicate. This is similar in some ways in that Georgia has to button it down, be on their P's and Q's, do your job, and don't give those layups to them. It's going to be hard enough. Don't give them the easy stuff.
You mentioned their defense looking a little different now. What stands out to you about the way they played defense through, I guess, 3 games?
They played really hard. They got guys flying to the ball, punching at the ball, getting the ball out, disrupting the quarterbacks. They've been really disruptive in terms of things up front they do to create issues, batting balls, and they're physical. I mean, they're physical and fast. When you look at them, they have a depth in their front that they're able to play a lot of guys with size that are hard to move. So they do a really good job defensively, and they're multiple. They got, split safety and single high looks. They do a good job changing it up.
Well, that new defensive coordinator at Alabama, Kane Womack, is, apparently, according to Kirby, he's got some stuff in his bag. And all I've heard from the Alabama people is how whatever you've seen so far, just wait, because we've got stuff for you. We're going to show you some new stuff. I am of the opinion that I'm certain that's true, but it's not like Carson Beck, as a guy who's been on campus for 5 years and has to face a Kirby Smart and Glenn Schumann defense every day. It's not like he hasn't seen every pressure known to man, right? So it just comes back to, can he process in the game? Will he be able to overcome crowd noise and those sorts of things, which you would hope he can do, right, as a veteran quarterback for Georgia, and then execute. And that brings us back to the offensive line performance, the running back performance. Can the wide receivers win? Can Georgia get a run game to open up the play action? They're going to be tested and they're going to be hit with some things they haven't seen yet, but that doesn't mean that they're going to see things that they have never seen. So Georgia should be able to handle whatever they bring at them. But it's like Kirby said, they have great players too. They have great athletes too. So execution is what's going to make the difference. You're a good player, they're a good player. Who is more mentally tough and who can execute when it gets tough? That's going to dictate the winner.
Kirby, I know you sort of over here touched on this when you talked about going back to Tuscaloosa and some of the feelings you had about that. But I'm just curious, because because of your history, personal history with Nick Saban and working for him, and then some great games against him over these last 9 years. Just personally, does it feel
Another question.
any nostalgia in you, or just different, or I think the word strange was used. Is that how does it feel for you personally to not be going against an Alabama team that he's not coaching?
Well, he recruited a lot of them, and they're good players, and I think anytime you go against a really good team that's a powerhouse in college football, that it's a challenge. And I really look at it like this is a hell of an opportunity for our kids, our program, national stage, and we're on the national stage a lot. We've been in the national stage a lot, especially the last 3 to 4 years. So it's the reason kids want to come to Georgia. They say, I want to play in games like that. Most viewed game 2 weeks ago Saturday night was our game. It's going to probably be that way this Saturday night. And when you start looking at it, kids want to have an opportunity to play in those tight games, and that's we're going to have more of them after this. So it's a great opportunity to play in a national stage, and that's what we built our program on is playing tough opponents.
Oh, yes, sir, Kirby Smart. Round of applause, everybody, for the head coach at the University of Georgia. He took what was a very boring question, frankly, that has been asked 100 times, and he said, yeah, that's fine. I'm going to tell you what this game is about. This game is an opportunity for the University of Georgia to step out in front of the world and just show everybody who they are. That makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Imagine what the talk is this week. Imagine what the pregame speech is going to be like. It's not about you. It's about us. Not in my box. Not today. It's about us. Way to go, Kirby. That was some good stuff right there. That is what this game is about.
Going back to last year, new coaching staff at Alabama, a lot of transfer players, new people. How much will this game be similar to that one when it comes to their game plan? How similar are these teams, or are they vastly different than they were when you faced them last year?
Yeah, I don't know that. I mean, I don't know their game plan, so I don't know how similar it'll be or different it'll be. I mean, we're a different team. They're a different team. They're a different staff. We're a similar staff. So I can't compare last year's game to this year's.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of, like I said earlier, what are you going to do? I mean, we don't know how they're going to attack Georgia. Georgia's going to try some things. They don't know exactly how they want to attack Alabama. They're going to have to figure it out during the game. So for the longest period, people gave Georgia and Kirby Smart credit for being the best, the head coach and the best coaching staff in America because of the types of adjustments they make in the game. And more so than any game they've played so far this season, this game is going to be a prime example of how Kirby and his staff can adjust in game to try to feel out what Alabama's trying to do and then figure out the best way to attack it and prevent them from being successful. That's going to be the game inside the game, and it's going to be a great thing to watch.
Coach, in terms of your veteran leadership returning, from a leadership perspective, how have you seen this core group of guys, the upperclassmen, grow since that SEC championship game last year? What impact has it had on them moving forward?
Well, I think each one different impact. There's guys in the locker room, upset, and everybody handles that in different ways. I think, the motivation it gives to guys to want to come back and have an opportunity to win an SEC championship, which, this group didn't do last year. They have a chance to do that. It doesn't all hinge on this game, but that game did. And I certainly think that a lot of our guys, remember it, and they want to use that as motivation, where the motivation should be to play your best and defeat your opponent in a big stage on the road in the SEC, which is always a challenge. And it's really about the preparation we do today in these next 3 to 4 days.
Yeah, and Kirby's exactly right. I mean, if these guys were going to be motivated by this game, they should have been motivated in January, right, when they were going through all those workouts back during the off-season meets and runs and lifts and all that kind of stuff. They should have been motivated during camp. This is what they should have been thinking of. That's not the kind of thing that's going to dictate this game. With that said, there are players who have said as much. Carson Beck, Malachi Starks, Jalen Walker, talked about how much it meant to them to walk off that field in Atlanta and not be the winner. So that's why this game is getting all the hype, all the buzz, because if you're a competitor, you want to go back and right that wrong in your eyes. So yeah, it matters, but it doesn't matter near as much. All that stuff's already done. The hay's in the barn. It doesn't matter near as much as how much they can take that work, that focus, that drive, and now rein it in, focus it on what they have to do play by play Saturday night in Tuscaloosa.
Kirby, I wonder in the times you may have had a chance to see Nick on TV, what you think of him in that role and what you make of his life after coaching, after obviously being relentless as a college
Another Nick
coach
question.
for so many years.
He's extremely thorough, and he enjoys what he does. I'm thrilled that he gets an opportunity to do what he wants to do and be with who he wants to be within his family, and enjoy that. And I'm really happy he's still part of college football because he makes college football better.
I concur.
With 3 games under your belt now, how do you evaluate how your team has started in those games?
Well, I wouldn't say that we've started fast. I would say that everybody wants to start fast, but sometimes it's like that. And sometimes there's no rhyme and reason, and then sometimes there's things you do that you could do better, you could execute better. Sometimes they just beat you and they just whip you. And it's gone both ways, offensively and defensively. We've had drives defensively that we gave up too much field position and too many consecutive third downs that we didn't get off the field that maybe just made our offense start backed up. But it hasn't been perfect. But we have shown resiliency, and that's a trait that I would probably trade outside of perfect. I would trade a lot of traits for resiliency.
Well, I mean, Kirby didn't lie to you there. He told you straight up what's going on, and he told you why. I mean, sometimes you can't explain it. Sometimes you just get whipped, even if you're Georgia, even if you're supposed to be an All-American. That's why you play one snap at a time and then focus on the next snap. I appreciate resilience as well, Kirby. I want to see the team fight when things are hard. However, I would prefer to see us, be a little more efficient, a little more consistent earlier in the game, as I'm sure all Bulldogs would.
Kirby, you mentioned some of the guys maybe using last year's loss as motivation. Just, is there anything you guys do as a staff to make sure that they're not trying to chase ghosts and change the past?
Nope. I mean, I don't think we chase the past at all. I think that you watch the tape, 2 different teams. We're focused on like what we can do to be our best this week. The ghost we're chasing is past performances this year and what we can do to clean that up and how we can be more efficient. I wouldn't say it's anything to do with them.
Well, there you go. It's like I said earlier, it's about us, not them. And he's right. They've got plenty to work on. If the answer were anything other than we need to get better than we were against Clemson and better than we were against Tennessee Tech and better than we were against Kentucky. If it's any other answer than that, then he's not focused on the right thing and the players aren't focused on the right thing. Now, the question is, do you believe Kirby Smart? Do you trust in him to get them to focus on the correct thing? History says we should. Do you?
Hi there. I was just wondering if you had any kind of comment on the reckless driving arrests, particularly the Daniel Harris arrest after the Kentucky game.
Yeah, I'm terribly disappointed, and something that we don't stand for.
Have time for one more question.
Well, all you can do is answer it straight up. I mean, that question's been asked over and over and over. So there it is.
Forgot my question, but go on another one. Over the last 51 games, you've only had 2 losses, both to Alabama. What would winning this game mean to you?
It mean we got to get ready for Auburn. I mean, it's really that simple, guys. It's a conference schedule game. It's going to be a really tough environment on the road, which sounds like a broken record because the last one we were talking about was a tough environment on the road. And you know, win or lose, the next one's going to be really hard, and the next one's going to be really hard, and the next one's going to be really hard. They all are hard. And in our league, in our conference, you see it every week. It's tough. It's physical. So we got to have a great week of preparation. They got a tremendous team. Nothing but respect for Kalen DeBoer and what he's done with that team and that staff. I think he's done a great job of putting them in a position to grow and get better. And they've gotten better with each game. So we need to do the same this week.
Well, there it was. Kirby telling you, he's letting you know. This game is the most important game on the schedule because it's the one we're playing this week. And what does it mean? Win or lose, it means that we have another tough game next week. All that's true. Even with that said, we all know this is an important game for Kirby and the University of Georgia, both inside the SEC standings, the way the schedule plays out, for a chance to get to Atlanta and play for a championship at the end of the year. Until next time. Y'all enjoy the games. Take care of each other. Take care of your friends. Take care of yourselves and your families. And go Dogs!
Told him, how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told him.